St. John Henry Newman said, "To be deep in history is to cease to be Protestant." Many Protestant Christians, myself included, once we started reading church history, we realized the church that Jesus established is the Catholic Church. And recently, a pretty popular evangelical speaker, pastor, writer, they do it all, said some things that is leading me to believe he's on his way to becoming Catholic. Francis Chan. And the funny thing is, I read a lot of articles and a lot of books written by Protestants that hate the Catholic Church. And one website I go to is this Reformed website. And the Reformed Church is still, they stay true to the principles of John Calvin and Martin Luther. And they hate the Catholic Church. They already thought Francis Chan went off the rails when he became a charismatic, because their tradition, the Protestant tradition of Reformed and Lutherans, is that the spiritual gifts such as tongues and prophecy ceased with the apostles. But what I always liked about Francis Chan, even being a Catholic, I knew he was honest. And if you're an honest Protestant evangelical, Bible-believing, Bible-alone Christian, as they call themselves, as I called myself for many years, Bible alone teaches that the charismatic gifts didn't cease. I mean, St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians, "I wish you all spoke in tongues. Do not forbid speaking in tongues." And these reformers still stick to their tradition that tongues was just for the apostles. So now they think they thought he fell away when that happened. And but now I just read on their site, and I'll read it verbatim. Francis Chan rejects Protestant view of communion, embraces Catholic transubstantiation. So, I mean, they thought tongues was bad enough, but now he's talking Catholic theology. He's really off the rails. And what Francis Chan said was this. He said, God has got me so excited. He's showing me things that's making me cry, and I just want to share with the church. He says, for 1,500 years, everyone in the church believed that communion became the literal body and blood of Christ. Wow. That's basically Catholic theology till today, because the Catholic Church never changed. He said it wasn't until 500 years ago, this is Francis Chan, evangelical, saying this, it wasn't until 500 years ago that someone popularized the theory that it was just symbolic. And then he goes on to say, for 1,000 years there was one church. And basically what he's saying, it was this Catholic Church. And then the East-West split, with the Orthodox split away, which I still consider them Catholic. They just don't recognize the Pope as their leader, but they're Catholic in every other way. And they're the only other church that can trace their lineage of their priests all the way down to the apostles, which gives them the authority to serve the bread and wine and call it the body and blood of Christ. So then he goes on to say, I noticed, and this is good Catholic apologetics, what he's about to say next. He said, I noticed at that time is the first time the church, any church, put a pulpit in the center of the gathering. Before that, it was the body and blood of Christ was the center, was always in the center of the gathering. Wow, he pretty much described the Catholic Church as it is today. He just hasn't realized he's Catholic yet. He's preaching Catholic theology. The Reformed guys that are mad at him realize it, but I don't think he realizes how Catholic he is yet. This guy is going to be Catholic once he realizes that the church he's talking about still exists today. It's called the Catholic Church. And he basically went on to say that guys like him spend 20 hours a week studying to come out and speak for an hour. And communion's an afterthought. And he's right. I was evangelical for years. And it's funny because evangelicals say Christ is the center of our church. It's all about Jesus, all about Jesus. But in reality, their service is all about the preacher. I mean, they might have a rock band singing some praise and worship songs. That's awesome. But it always centers on the preacher. How good the preacher is how big the church grows. If he's a real gifted speaker, that church will grow. If he's a lousy speaker, he could be the most holy guy, knows the Lord better than anybody, but he just doesn't have a gift of preaching and teaching, that church will be empty. I'm telling you, I was an evangelical for 30 years. This is true. And in my opinion, I think Francis Chan is a gifted speaker, but he realizes that the church wasn't founded on gifted speakers. It was founded on the body and blood of Jesus Christ, the literal. And so I just thought that was awesome. Google this guy, Francis Chan, and I bet you within a year he's Catholic. And, when I became Catholic, that was the first thing that made me want to be Catholic. When I realized using the Bible alone, because if you use the Bible alone, nowhere in it does it lead you to believe it's symbolic. That's a man-made tradition from Protestant men like Zwingli, Ulrich Zwingli, and men behind, that followed him just believed this symbolic thought. So, but if you just read the Bible alone, there's no way you can come up with the body and blood was just symbolic. And then if you look in church history and look at the men who knew the apostles, Ignatius of Antioch, St. Ignatius of Antioch called it heretical that people would deny that. And all throughout history, like Francis Chan said, for 1,500 years, everyone in the church believed that. So, and then Francis Chan goes on to something else interesting. He said, so basically for 1,000 years, there was one church, and then there was, the East-West church. So 1,500 years, there were two churches, but basically believed the same thing. Everybody still believed that was the body and blood of Christ. He says now there's 30,000 Christian denominations. And he's like, Christ doesn't want that. I'm like, wow, Francis Chan is getting it. Christ doesn't want that. Christ prayed for unity. He said, let them be one as we are one, Father. So these were two of the strongest reasons that I started looking at the Catholic Church. And it took a couple years for me to fully jump in because it's kind of scary because you're taught in Protestantism the Catholic Church is pagan, the Catholic Church is the whore of Babylon, Catholic Church is wrong. So it's really scary. You got to make sure, my wife was ready to jump in from day one, but I just kept reading and reading. And, I actually read books by some really good Protestant theologians like Jack White and Norman Geisler. And it's funny because one of the books by Jack White, he wrote in there, I'm writing this book because a lot of evangelicals are becoming Catholic. A lot of evangelical pastors and theologians are becoming Catholic. And I'm like, really? In my little bubble evangelicalism, I'm told and I see only Catholics are becoming Protestants. It's not going the other way. So I Googled to see who all these people were. And I found a lot of really smart, educated people. And I started reading their books. One interesting guy was Alex Jones. Recommend this book. Alex Jones, No Price Too High. He passed away. He's with the Lord. He was a Pentecostal pastor, and Bible alone, he's seen that how the church worshipped and the Eucharist, the communion was the center. And then he looked at church history. So on Wednesday nights, he started having communion every Wednesday night like they did in the early church. And the more they study, the more they realize the Catholic Church had it right. Make a long story short, him and about 90% of his Pentecostal church became Catholic. And I always said, man, I would love to have been in that RCIA class with all those Pentecostals. So that's a great book. And then, of course, if you're Catholic, you had to hear of Scott Hahn. If you're evangelical watching this, check this book out, Rome Sweet Home. He was a Calvinist, anti-Catholic, he was a Calvinist, anti-Catholic who became Catholic. Great book, Rome Sweet Home, the biblical reasons why he became Catholic. Then, of course, Evangelical Exodus, written by Doug Beaumont, forwarded by Francis Beckwith. Forwarded by Francis Beckwith when he was president of the Evangelical Bible Society. He became Catholic. Douglas Beaumont co-wrote one of the books that I read that was anti-Catholic with Norman Geisler. 2 years after he wrote that anti-Catholic book, he became Catholic because he looked into the Catholic Church to show why they were wrong. And he's like, wow, I think they're right. So Doug Beaumont wrote this book, Evangelical Exodus, about the seminary that he was on the faculty. The seminary was Southeastern Seminary, which was established by Norman Geisler. And Norman Geisler is a great Bible teacher. He passed away not too long ago. But he was a really solid Bible teacher and theologian. He never became Catholic, but half of his faculty and like dozens of his students became Catholic because he taught them so well and they knew the Bible so well. Then there's Surprised by the Truth, 11 converts, and these are all Assemblies of God pastors, Southern Baptist pastors, radio guys. These are all evangelical Christians. This is all their testimonies. If you're evangelical, you need to read this and get the other side of the story, Just like if you're conservative, I say watch CNN, and if you're a liberal, watch Fox News to know what each side's saying so you're not in a bubble. And then I started talking about when Francis Chan became charismatic, how, believing in the gifts of tongues and prophecy and the gifts that St. Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians. There was another great Bible teacher. He taught at Dallas Theological Seminary. This is kind of going off a little bit, but just to show you how a lot of evangelicals are just caught in man-made tradition. He was one of the brightest minds in Protestantism. Jack Deere, and back in the 80s, I read this book, Surprised by the Power of the Spirit. Again, by Bible alone, he realized that the gifts of the Spirit were for today. And he got thrown out of Dallas Theological Seminary. That's like the Harvard of Protestant seminaries because he dared to go against their man-made traditions. So even though this book's more about the charismatic gifts and why they're biblical, it just shows you how most Protestants will say Catholics just follow man-made traditions, and they're the ones in man-made tradition. So it's really exciting. Google Francis Chan, pray for him. He's been enlightened. He's seen the truth. And I believe he's going to be Catholic, which is pretty awesome. And we need some good Bible teachers in the church. We have a lot, but we're always looking to get some more. So Francis Chan, welcome to the church. I know you're on your way, brother, even though you don't know it yet. And I'll be praying for you. And even if you don't become Catholic, you're still my brother, and I still love you. God bless.